So today, let's welcome moderator Keisha Lenoir Fairman. That's a great name. Who will be moderating the panel about next steps to bringing medical cannabis to Georgia, hosted by Treevana. So one of our panelists could not be here with us today, Dr. Anthony, but we will have Hugo from Treevana stepping in for him. So thank you, Hugo, for that. Keisha, please join me on stage, as well as Cassandra Valdez, Dr. Gregory Smith, and Hugo, please join me on stage as well.
Well, good afternoon again, guys, and thank you for, if you're just getting here, for coming. If you've been here with us for the majority of the morning, thank you for staying and learning more about what this team is planning to do as it relates to medical marijuana. What I'll do is just a quick bio of each person on the panel, and I'll start with Dr. Greg Smith. So, Dr. Greg Smith is board certified in preventative medicine. He's a veteran of the U.S. Army, achieving the rank of major. He has been involved in the medical use of cannabis for over a decade. He's published over a dozen peer-reviewed scientific articles and has published extensively on the subject of medical cannabis. He is the author of Medical Cannabis, Basic Science and Clinical Applications, What Clinicians Need to Know and Why. And this is the first book of its kind directed at educating physicians and medical students on the practical use of cannabis for medical purposes. Dr. Greg is an MD, MPH, and he's earned his medical degree from Rush Medical School in Chicago and a Master's of Public Health from Harvard. Dr. Smith is inspired to help other physicians and medical professionals develop strong knowledge about medical cannabis to better both their patients, their lives, and the practice of modern medicine. Dr. Smith is an avid writer, having published 4 medical textbooks, a novel entitled Malpractice, and articles with many magazines and over a dozen peer-reviewed medical publications. Dr. Smith serves as medical director for Treevana Wellness, and he is an amazing human being who really, really cares about the patient and making sure that the patient not only understands, but their doctors and their healthcare providers have the knowledge that they need to educate them.
Excuse me, I'm going to make an announcement. We're recording this session, and we're going to do some cool editing, so we want everybody to sit in these first 2 rows. Make it look really cool.
Bring it in tight.
Yes, yes. Oh, well, that changes things, Brandon.
That looks like a Hugo move to me.
Nick, can you grab that? Thank you. Can somebody escort that guy out, please? Thank you.
He's disruptive. Okay, now that everybody's kind of situated and everyone looks amazing, let me just say that. I will introduce Cassandra Valdez. Cassandra brings over a decade of experience working in the cannabis industry. She's worked as a grower, buyer, and a merchant of all varieties of cannabis products, allowing her to have firsthand knowledge of seed-to-sale operations within the field. After spending years mastering cultivation techniques in Northern California, she combined her knowledge of business management with her passion for safe access by moving into the wholesale cannabis distribution and retail sector. She's managed and owned dispensaries in both Oregon and California, as well as consulted on projects in Florida, Maine, and Georgia. Cassandra also serves as Director of Operations for Treevana Wellness, a hemp-based platform that has partnered with highly respected physicians, i.e. Dr. Greg, who advocate the use of hemp-based cutting-edge treatments. In addition to her various business ventures, Cassandra is first and foremost a safe access advocate. And then I don't know if you guys were able to sit on the panel earlier with Hugo, but let me just kind of explain exactly who Hugo is. He's not only a part of Treevana Wellness, but again, he is the Chief Strategy Officer and Managing Partner of Treevana, as well as Treevana Remedy. It's a Class 2 vertically integrated Georgia medical cannabis license. He is an invaluable, driven, strategic, and provides deep domain expertise that specializes in assembling teams and employing winning strategies in the highly complicit legal cannabis industry. He proudly served in the U.S. Marines during Operation Enduring and Iraq Freedom in support of Maine Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center, Marine Air Ground Task Force Training Command, and holds a degree in business with a minor in economics from National University San Diego. Previously, Hugo was the Director of Strategy for Regional Medical Group, a patient-focused medical platform with 12-plus locations in Georgia, and was also Director of Strategy for PCR DX, a molecular testing laboratory platform that provides medical professionalism with personalized molecular testing solutions for viral, bacterial, fungal, and pathogens with testing centers in Alabama and Georgia. So today we are going to focus on ways that we're going to bring access here in Georgia. And I have a couple of questions that I wanted to kind of ask you guys.
Great.
The United States has witnessed enormous changes concerning the acceptance of medical and recreational cannabis use. 63% of the U.S. population now has access to medical cannabis markets. What research is being performed on medical conditions commonly treated with cannabis?
I think I'll take that
Yeah,
one
go
since
for
it's
it.
research focused. A lot. And so in the decade that I've been involved with this as a full-time part of my medical career, it went from almost no research being done in humans to thousands or 3,000 studies ongoing at the moment related to cannabinoids around the world. Probably Israel is the world leader in health-driven healthcare use of cannabinoids, at making it literally part of their healthcare system. The Europeans, Germany and Denmark especially, are making it part of their healthcare system. So it just becomes integral. It's just another aspect of the healthcare system. We are nowhere near to that in the United States. But we do have some research going on here. Not much, mostly small trials. I'm usually involved with 1 or 2 trials at any one time, probably 4 or 5 research projects a year. There's a lot of trials. There's not much research money because of the federal government really limits the research, and then all of the cannabis that we use in this country for medical research has to come from one farm at the University of Mississippi, where they have basically 2 or 3 strains, which they've been using the same strain since the 1970s. So we're really limited in this country, but the research is ongoing. There's 24,000 publications now at Medline and Medlars on cannabinoids.
To follow up with that, Dr. Gregg, what about research with minor cannabinoids?
Good question. That's the area I love, is the minors. Everyone's familiar? Can we have a little hand show? Everyone understands the minors?
Yeah.
The minors are going to be big, unlike the baseball teams.
Dr. Gregg, can you maybe explain the difference between majors and minors?
Yes, thank you, Hugo. So there's 2 majors. We know them all. There's THC, delta-9 THC is one of the major cannabinoids, and then CBD. So in almost every strain of cannabis sativa, those 2 are the lion's share of the oil. A typical plant, 50 to 60% of the weight of that plant is oil. And most of that oil is CBD and THC, depending on which strain it is. So then all the rest, maybe a couple % of that oil is minor cannabinoids. And there's about 121 at the last count. So there's CBD and THC, and then there's 119 minors. The minors are important. We're just starting to get quantities large enough that we can actually do research, because there were such tiny amounts that it was super expensive to extract it, to have it to do research. My particular love for the last couple years has been THCV, and which is tetrahydrocannabivarin. And anyone who can say that at the end of this course, I'm going to buy them a drink. THCV. The other, basically the twin brother of THCV is CBDV. So you see the parallels here? THCV, CBDV. Those are the two variants. They're unlike any of the other oils. They're entirely novel in their clinical effects. And what our research, and there's been plenty of other research from larger companies in Europe, for weight loss, controlling diabetes, modifying your blood lipids, and hair regrowth. So that's just one. The next one I'll just mention, CBC, cannabicramine, which will be healing fractures and treating osteoporosis. All these hemp oils work through our endocannabinoid system that we didn't know about until the 1990s and modify therapeutic effects. And if we teach this in medical school, we'll lose federal funding. So all the doctors need to go and learn about this somewhere else than medical school because they're not allowed to be taught, or the school will lose federal funding. So it's a constant series of barriers and frustrations, and that's why we love this field.
And to add to that too, we talk about the medicine that's being created in markets all over the country, and specifically here in Georgia. What we'd like to focus on with the new and emerging Georgia market is creating medicines that are a little more condition specific. And that includes really capitalizing on those minor cannabinoids. It's a THC and CBD are fabulous, but they're not panaceas. You don't want to treat an ailment for insomnia with the same treatment that you use for joint and back pain. So we would really like to see, and it's part of Treevana's mission and goal, to be able to really cater products to specific ailments, to create really personalized products specifically for Georgia patients. But and that's part of why we're so blessed to have Dr. Greg on our team, because it's very cutting edge, and these minor cannabinoids at this juncture are in relatively small quantities. But we'd like to see that become a more prevalent part of the industry moving forward and be able to create the most effective medicine for people.
And there's also a significant amount of supportive evidence online that is very tough to find. But some good news with regards to evidence-based science and validating a lot of the narrative that Dr. Greg mentioned. There are a lot of crowd IP and technology platforms that are now sharing this information internationally. So therefore, it's allowing the international, collegiate, and independent world to collab on being able to profile and for research and development, to be able to grow this particular space from a authoritative perspective. It's very objective, and we believe in evidence-based science from a medical provider and practitioner approach, but it's also understanding that there are three levels of conversation. There's the international conversation, which is hundreds of years more advanced than it is stateside. Then of course you have the state, you have let's say the country, the American perspective of where we are in that life cycle, or the cannabis life cycle. And then there is the micro level, which happens to be at the state level. And all states, just like we all support, different teams, different sports teams, all states have their own narrative on how they want to introduce this medicine, right? Now, speaking for what a company like ourselves had to do to get a license here in Georgia, it's being able to create better medicine through education. So you need to be able to provide educational resources, modeling, and assets to be able to educate not only providers, but also educate authorities, politicians, and so on. Because before these new conversations that we're having now in the space, it's an open conversation. Before we were able to even introduce these to authorities, it was always known as the devil's lettuce, right? We're in a Bible Belt arena, coming from Florida and other markets. And to be able to transition this as a medicine and get accepted into public policy definitely goes a long way, because it starts the exponential growth curve like a domino effect, right? So once the average person realizes that they can take a medicine or oil that doesn't get them high, then it's easier to open up conversations that this is a true medicine, right?
We're especially excited about, what we see in new and emerging markets too is how that education and that knowledge spreads like wildfire. Here in Georgia, patients don't have access to medicine at this juncture. But I guarantee you, this time next year, when the doors are open to dispensaries and patients have access directly to medicine, the general knowledge of the population, not even just patients, grows exponentially. I know when I first started in the West Coast and, a state like Oregon came online, we'd have people in those first few months come in and ask about the difference between THC and CBD. Flash forward a year later into that being a more mature market, I'd have those same demographic coming in and wanting to know about the terpene profile and the cannabinoid makeup of the strains that they were buying. And, to see that sort of general knowledge really be so widely accepted, events like this, we're really at just at the tipping point of what the Georgia cannabis scene is going to look like. And, I'm really excited about what the future holds, and specifically this event next year. Once we've got a medical market that's thriving here, the interest is going to skyrocket. And it's people like the attendees here today. I joke all the time that we're like born again cannabis users. I feel like I should have a name tag that says "Ask me about my cannabis," because once you know the knowledge, once you have the tools and the keys to be able to help people improve their quality of life, it's almost impossible to keep it to yourself. So I think, kudos to everybody for showing up today and to try and absorb as much knowledge as you possibly can and bring it back to, your family, friends, and associates. So.
And I always use the correlation. Just like you mentioned that I always relate this to kind of scripture, but just like Jesus saves, cannabis saves, right? So it's funny because it's like I correlate this with, it's almost like somebody finding Jesus, right? Like when they discover cannabis, they're like, "Oh my God!"
I'm like a Latino Billy Graham over here. Yeah.
They want to tell everybody about it. They start handing out books. Like Dr. Greg's books are our Bibles. So whenever I meet somebody, the first thing that I say is, listen, before we even get started, you need to read this book.
Yeah, the good news.
Like, you need to read this book. And then from there, then you start hearing the conversation. It usually starts with, "Oh my God, I did not know."
Yeah.
Right? Once you hear the "I did not know," then you know that the bridge has been opened to now have conversations.
Yeah.
Right?
Just a quick segue in. Thank you. Two, we need you guys. Okay, so it's not just I'm pushing the book. The book, though, is sort of a set of a beginning, that we can all be on a beginning of what can this medicine do and how safe is it and where did it come from historically. So it's a simple way so we're all on the same platform. But we're going to need you, and like he says, next year we're all going to be involved. You're going to have more work and involvement than you understand. This is my 5th state, my 3rd country I've opened grows in. It's so much fun every time we get reinvigorated. So welcome, and we look forward to working with you guys.
Well, that leads me to my next question. So Georgia's HOPE Act, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, Cassandra, but Georgia's HOPE Act, as far as legalizing low THC oil for Georgia patients, was passed in 2019. However, in 2022, there's still no access to the medicine. I know you said maybe coming towards next year, but what's next for Georgia as far as the medical programming, and when can patients like myself, because again, I have this really pretty card.
Sure, yeah. And everyone wants to be able to use it. Yeah, wouldn't it be amazing?
Who has a card? Just so go ahead. Who has a card?
Yeah.
Oh, no, but how many people have cards in here?
Yeah, a few.
Okay.
How many people have cards in this state?
Yeah.
8,000?
Yeah, right. Shuffle my deck of medical cards.
Okay, so now just while we wait for the card, from an economics perspective, and I'm an economist by nature, it's always reverse engineering the population size and then scaling from there. If you look at Georgia, Georgia's considered a very predominant state on the East Coast. It's a logistics haven. You have, it's the new Hollywood. They make more movies here than they do in Hollywood now. And now it's about to have medical cannabis, which transitions into other modeling, right? This is the music mecca. Atlanta is a very dense and great city. So there's a significant amount of opportunity of medical cannabis being introduced to this space. What's really great, and I think I mentioned this in the early presentation, is each state goes through several different types of life cycles. And this, where you're at now is exponential growth, right? So there are several people, we've sat on several different panels like this the last 10 years, and having the same type of introductory meetings and presentations in front of, there's basically three types of, let's just say, I call them avatars, but let's say users, right? You have a patient that really needs it for medicine, right? You have somebody that's looking to understand the entrepreneurship components of figuring out how to develop profit centers and monetize. And then you have the other, which is the recreational user, and it's all one ecosystem, right? They all drive each other, they all drive the machine, and they all grow in one harmony, right? It starts medical, it transitions, and it creates the economic multipliers to be able to justify why the state now is like, okay, it was Bible's lettuce before.
Right. Well,
But-
and the stigma
Yeah.
goes away.
And then the
You know
stigma
what I mean?
goes away.
Once the doors are open to dispensaries and it's demystified, and legislators and local municipalities are able to see that it's not reefer madness. We're not zombies. Wandering the streets. And to kind of revert back to Keisha's question about the timeline from 2019 to 2022. The good news, bad news about being the 30-something state to adopt medical laws is you learn a lot of mistakes along the way. You learn what to do and what not to do. But we have to take into consideration that legislators are not cannabis experts. Most of the time, they're not even cannabis enthusiasts, and even more rare are they cannabis users. So you have non-industry experts writing the rules and regulations and laws. I will say I can commend the state of Georgia on really trying to utilize resources with industry professionals to try to be able to shape the landscape. It has taken a long time, certainly not longer than other states. This is pretty par for the course. But at the end of the day, at the precipice of this market opening, I can truly say that I am very encouraged by the way the legislation is written currently. And what we know is legislation has to be written in a certain way to get it passed, and to create the access. And then once the market opens and the patients understand what they have access to, what they don't have access to, what the processes look like, then they start to advocate for themselves. When you see that that 5% low THC oil, well, I don't have access to a vape pen. I don't have access to smokable flower. When patients get into a dispensary and they see what products are available to them, then they start advocating for themselves. Then there's pushback. Then they start contacting, their local representatives and saying, hey, how do we make this better? How, I know what works for me. How can we help to cater the market to be the best and most effective for Georgia patients?
And also, sorry, Keisha, I just wanted to kind of transition real quick. But also understanding that each state has their own policy on modes of intake, starting out, right? So for example, the stigma is always flower, and a lot of authorities correlate that stigma with smokable flower. So therefore, usually start introducing oil as a bridge to start segueing into other modes of intake, right? And a mode of intake is an ingestible, smoke. They have eye drops and nebulizers now and inhalers. So the fast tracking absorption continuously grows. But circling back, in Georgia, after looking, I think Georgia's population of what, 21 million?
We're about 10 million.
10 million.
Yeah, 10 million.
That's
Whoa,
Florida.
way off. Anyway,
It's 20,000 patients.
yeah. But anyway, so right now, the current registry for patient registry, I think is at 20,000, right? That's 20,000 patients that have medical cannabis cards and don't know where to go, right? And it's intriguing because, you pay $200 or $300 by the time you get a card. And then each state is different, so it gives you like 2 years to renew your card. And some people have had their patient registry cards for almost 3 years now with no medicine, and now have to renew.
Yeah, so and it's really pretty, guys. It's really good for selfies.
And one day it's going to be worth something. Yeah.
But outside of that, I'm stuck. I'm fortunate because I think what we've been talking about a lot is patience and legislation, but one of the things that was really difficult was finding a doctor who could even help me get the card and understand, and the doctor's here. Dr. Bindu happens to be here, and she helped me get access to my card because of the issues that I was having. But then once I got the card, the first thing I did was reach out like, okay, now what do I do? Where do I go?
Right.
So did I hear we have a doctor here who has...
There is a Georgia doctor in the house.
No, because there is. I just want to clap.
Dr. Bindu, can you stand up? Can you stand up?
There she is.
Thank you.
Well, and as Hugo mentioned before, too, that's why education is so paramount. You know what I mean? Not only for consumers and for patients, but for healthcare providers. Yeah. Which why having somebody like Dr. Greg on staff, who's not only a medical practitioner, but also a research-based, I don't know what to mean, research-based doctor, it lends a lot of credibility, and what we really need to do is demystify this for healthcare providers. We're talking about an entire system of the body that was not taught in medical school up until maybe, the last...
They still don't teach the endocannabinoids.
Exactly. So, and I don't know, we adore you, but, medical doctors don't want to hear that they don't know something, especially about the human body.
Especially surgeons. But.
So there's a lot of resistance, but I think that's what's so important to not only Treevana, but I can speak on behalf of the other licensees here in the state, too. We're all of one mind that really capturing that audience of medical providers is so important, to make even patients more comfortable with adding cannabis into their healthcare regime. I think people really look for that stamp of approval from their medical provider.
And to answer one of your questions, Keisha, is what can patients do right now? Mm-hmm. Right. So that question is twofold and can also segue into other conversations. But I believe that I can introduce some of the things I'm about to tell you now. As mentioned before, a lot of the regulation is on major cannabinoids, right? The THCs of the world that get you high, right? The good news is through a significant amount of research and R&D, the minor cannabinoids are slowly evolving, right? That aren't part of regulatory environments. And through your own education, because I'm not an attorney, don't play one on TV nor the internet, but through your own education, you can understand what other cannabinoids you can use to help offset a lot of what you could have done in a medical cannabis environment, right? For example, for PTSD, if you're using a lot of psychoactive cannabinoids, there are those psychoactive cannabinoid profiles that aren't regulated right now, right? I don't want to mention what they are because I don't want to get in trouble, but they're out there and they're legal. But the challenge is the quality controls on your medicine. Mm-hmm. So whenever I talk to anyone that doesn't know anything about the space, the way I bridge the conversation, I usually say, okay, John, my brother is a lieutenant colonel in the Space Force. He graduated from the Air Force Academy, and he's been my anti-advocate for as long as I've known him. So I'm glad that he's here right now. The reason I'm bringing him up is the way that I usually bridge a conversation with an authority is I usually say, okay, Lieutenant Colonel, do you get your medicine from the farm? Do you get your medicine from his pharmacy, or do you get your medicine at the gas station? Right? And they say the pharmacy. Exactly. So why would you get your medicine at the gas station? Right? The reason why I'm bringing that up is the equation is simple. If whatever you put in is what you get out, right? So great quality medicine has the right organic and natural and quality controls to be able to get to the shelf, right? That takes time, energy, allocation of resources, R&D, very labor intensive, especially at scale. And that gets passed down to the consumer,
Yeah.
right? So if you want a really high dosage of great medicine, and let's say it's $200, I'm just throwing that out there, right? Or you can get the same medicine, but it just has a different name, and it's at a gas station for $10. There's a difference. There's a reason why it's $10, right? And some of it's still an unregulated environment in several of those dimensions. The FDA is stepping in. They have been stepping in the last 3 years. What will probably happen on the radar in the next 2 to 3 years is almost anything that's on the shelf right now will be completely regulated from not as an approval with the FDA, but registered with the FDA. So it'll have to be OTC, GMP, ISO standard compliant, and it's going to eliminate about 90% of the industry. So all that CBD that you see that's being sold right now is not going to be here in 2 to 3 years.
So the FDA has been working for the last few years and the last few grow seasons with hemp providers all over the country and really taking feedback from hemp farmers in order to be able to kind of build that framework of the regulation of cultivation and processing. And the next natural step is for them to work the framework for the compliance and regulation for distribution. Okay, so a lot of the CBD companies out there, you can make a claim on your label and talk about your percentages and what your ingredients are, but there's no accountability. Nobody's checking that. Nobody's verifying that what you put on that label is actually what's in that label. You know, things people forget about is that these are not stable products. There's a shelf life. You know, cannabis degrades, cannabinoids degrade over time. How long has this been sitting in a shipping container? Was it grown here in the United States? Was it grown internationally? These are all things that there's no accountability at this point in the CBD space, but it's coming. You know, and my advice to new companies entering into the CBD space, and something that we pride ourselves on, Treevana, is we've built our company to forecast that FDA regulation like it's already here. You know, whether that means producing your products in GMP certified manufacturing plants, ISO certified manufacturing plants, doing independent testing and verifying your quality and potency and purity at every step of the manufacturing process. That means your flour, that means your crude oil, and that means your finished products. And that's how you ensure that your patients are really getting their money's worth, you know? And when I see a variation of products on the shelf, like Hugo said, you get what you pay for, and to have truly good quality ingredients, I'd rather pay $100 for a product that works than $50 for a product that doesn't.
So Cassandra, question. It's a very common trait in this industry that funding or that there's a large amount of capital needed to have good production and then to produce good products. How do we ensure that those costs aren't something that the patients end up absorbing because of the amount of capital used to start the production? Is that something that we've considered when talking about the quality?
Sure, and it's a great question, and something that's of paramount concern if you are somebody on the medical cannabis side of things. You know, most patients, if you are working with a traditional pharmaceutical, those drugs are subsidized by your insurance company. You know, you're not paying full price for those medications. Cannabis is not subsidized by your insurance company, and it is not an inexpensive treatment, especially for those who truly are suffering from serious ailments. You know, Treevana has tried to partner with different nonprofits here in the state to try to help subsidize for low-income families, for veterans groups, et cetera. Those are definitely initiatives that we want to take into consideration. Also, with any industry too, it's improving upon and streamlining your operation. You know, anyone that's growing here or new and it's so important to partner with people that are working in existing markets, because there's no room for error. Yeah. You know, we need closed-loop, heavily integrated systems to keep costs low, so that patients are not incurring those additional costs and those additional expenditures. And, you know, that's why it's the responsibility of these licensees here in the state to, you know, and again, part of the good news of this long and lengthy process of getting medicine to patients is it's really forced the companies involved to make sure that we've left, you know, no I's undotted and no T's uncrossed as far as our operations, to try to create uninterrupted access to high-quality medicine.
Great, because as a patient, I'm currently on a blood thinner that's $5,000 a month, and I would love to have an alternative, and I want to make sure, especially with other patients out here, and we're going to get to the question and answer section in just a second, because I know there's so many people with questions, but I know that's one of the things as a patient that's always important to me is cost, because that drives my entire livelihood, basically. So thank you for that answer.
The other part that I'd like to kind of support Cassandra's narrative is on compassionate care programs. There are several states, and they all go through, their own independent life cycles. But in the state of Georgia, the medical cannabis environment that has just evolved, it's still at its infancy stages. So, let's just say that in a perfect world, it'll be a year from now before we see medicine on shelves, and it will be here. So I commend Georgia on taking the steps. But in the meantime, patients still need to get medicine. So from an educational perspective, once again going into the minor cannabinoid side, the minor cannabinoids help evolve into other products that can help support some of those modalities during the short term, right? So it's in educating yourself on what those minor cannabinoids are to help support those short-term requirements as a patient. And the power, it has to go back to the patient on getting their own education on figuring out what they can do for themselves. The good news is you have a lot of thought leaders that step above the fold, and they create several different types of introductory educational assets to help you understand this particular space and in general, right? There's a famous saying that I always say that most people spend more time into shopping for a refrigerator than they do into getting medicine, right? They would rather spend all day going through a significant amount of websites to buy the perfect refrigerator, but they ask their friend, "Hey, Joe, you should take this. I get it at this gas station." That's not where you want to get your medicine. So, and the other intriguing is the stigma of the space is always on the smokable flower. There are a lot of other ancillary products and services that are completely off the smokable component. You have, compounds and creams for pain that are evolving and are transdermal that can take a lot of the endocannabinoids and transcend them through your own skin. So you're not smoking or ingesting it, but it's transdermal. So it's transcending into your skin. I'm not a doctor. So
I like that. That's a good term, transcending.
Well, and Hugo, I think that what you just said about people kind of talking to their friends and getting advice, well, today we're in a space where we are ready to take some questions from you guys so that you can ask the experts so you don't have to go to
Take the guessing out of
the gas station. So I see you have a question.
I do have a question, but before I get to my question, I just wanted to let everyone know, please ask your question in as clear and concise of a statement as possible, just for the sake of time. But Dr. Greg, I would love to hear from you on this. Coming from someone who lives in Canada where the market's fully open, there's lots of great products out there. Can you just talk to us real quick about the difference between terpenes and cannabinoids and how either one of those things can affect or help out with certain ailments and medical conditions?
Yeah, well, in fact, but I will comment on Canada first, which I love. If the weather was warmer, I'd be living there.
Okay.
So they are way ahead of us in recreational use of THC, delta-9 THC. They are somewhat good in medical THC. They are horrible in the use of CBD and very, very limited and difficult to get hold of CBD in Canada in any kind of good quality. So funny. But they're great with THC, both, especially recreational use. The terpenes, there's about a half a dozen terpenes. These are oils that are not present only in cannabis, they're present in peppers and berries and fruits. So these are, whereas a cannabinoid has to only be present in cannabis sativa. So There's about a half dozen that are important terpenes, and they work together with the THC or the CBD to help it fit in the lock. So there's your receptor, which kind of looks like almost like a spider's web with a cup in it. And then here's your THC molecule. And the terpenes help it fit in like a rocket ship landing. And so when you have a nice terpene profile, you get different effects at this receptor. That's what the terpenes are about. And we are learning very quickly. I think we know enough now how to apply use of these half dozen terpenes for sleep, for pain, for inflammation. So that's what's going on with terpene profiling. Yeah.
Any other questions? Questions?
Can I ask someone, a show of hands, who has heard of Delta 8 in the audience here? Now 6 months ago we would not have had that. And I will just, 30-second thing about Delta 8, because right now we don't have any Delta 9 in this state. In fact, when I presented in front of a bunch of Georgia lawyers recently, we renamed the law to the I hope you have a friend in Colorado law instead of the hope law. Because if you don't have a friend in Colorado or California to mail it to you here illegally, you can't get any. So it's a funny law going back to 2019. We do have Delta 8 throughout the whole country. It is legal. It is made out of CBD. They take CBD and they modify it. It takes about 24 hours and they turn it into Delta 8 THC. It is a substance that does occur in nature, and because it does occur in nature, when all these laws come out, it will probably be legal. But at the moment, it is certainly a gray zone of how it fits under the 2018 hemp law. Who's heard of Delta 10, THC 0? It's going to be HCC. There's a bunch. Those don't exist in nature, and those are synthetic. And so those probably are going to go away. But Delta 8 is here to stay, and I love it, and I want to see it part of our armamentarium to treat people with in the future. It's available. Again, listen to Hugo and Cassandra. You want a good product from a good company that has certain standards to get your Delta 8. And it does all the same things as Delta 9, but you need a higher dose.
Okay. Yes.
Hi. As a healthcare worker, I'm a CMA for a private doctor's office in Louisville, Kentucky. Hence why I came here to learn more, because I had to take classes, University of San Diego, that I'm doing right now, healthcare and medicine and cannabis. And right now, my doctor, you know for a fact as a doctor yourself, they can't say federally, because the federal, they can't say, to advise about cannabis. So in our office, we deal more with geriatrics and more elderly. And a lot of them do not like pain medications, and we've had huge problems between Indiana and Kentucky, opioids, as you all know. And so if we're Kentucky, we're on hold, so I have to say this, and I'm going to say it. After we go through our slow, politically manipulated, speaking of Kentucky, as you all know, we have McConnell, of course, that's holding us back. Also saying that there is no proven research for cannabis and medicine. We also know that's a lie. If it was a lie, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
That's right.
So with my doctor, we're kind of undercover. So what I wanted to know is, how can we connect with the cannabis that you, more likely, we have to educate ourselves, because I'm getting a lot of people coming in, as you say, from the convenience store CBD, and they're saying, well, it's not working for us, it's not working for me, so I'm never going to use it because it doesn't work.
I tried CBD, it didn't work. Yeah. How many
I
times
tried
have you
and
heard
it didn't work. Yeah. So my question was to them, well, first, where did you go to get it? And I know a lot of people are not asking this question, but with me being in it now, I can ask those questions and say, where are you getting it? Oh, I got a convenience store. Okay, well, first things first.
Right.
The CBD that you're buying for that ridiculous price, yes, it's cheap, but that's what it is. It's cheap CBD. Right. It probably, I told them more than likely.
If it's CBD at all.
And that's what I was getting to, if it even has CBD at all, because some of them even have, what I'm learning is that they cut it. It's like some of them have 1%. I learned that Marinol was cut by 1% THC, nothing else. Yeah. The rest of it is organized medications that are processed through it. Sure. So they're not even getting Marinol. They're not even getting THC. So for cancer patients, they're paying this ridiculous money to get help, and it's not working. So what I wanted to do is, that's why I'm here. I need to make connections that I can have my doctor say, hey, patients, I got this person who wants to do CBD. I got all these patients. Can you help me find legalized or more productive, like Treevana and other companies out that I'm finding out about, to connect with, that I could say, hey, look, I need to come to you guys and say, I need this product for my patients.
What I can say is, obviously doctors are leery to stick their necks out with very good reason. There's too much on the line and too much help that needs to be provided for these patients. What we can say is giving patients the tools, letting them know what questions to ask, what check marks to look for as far as when shopping for CBD products, even if you don't want to endorse a line themselves. But Dr. Gregg, I think, can speak to the education opportunities for medical providers.
Yeah, so I'd like to correct a couple things, some common misunderstandings in the medical community. You are not allowed to write a prescription for cannabinoids. You are allowed to talk and recommend, freedom of speech. So, but if you write it on a prescription pad, you will lose your license, even in states with medical marijuana laws. So that's the only thing you can do, is write a prescription for a cannabinoid. And that's a federal requirement, and it'll impact your DEA license and your medical license. But other than that, your doctors can talk about all this stuff very freely and document it in the chart. Two, the Institutes of Health, the National Institutes of Health, which is a large government-supported institution, very well respected around the world, came up with 11 findings for therapeutic benefits for cannabinoids, THC and CBD. So they're out there, it's been published. That publication came out in 2018, so it was 4 years ago. So they're well-recognized therapeutic benefits, and again, 24,000 publications out there. Three, not only this is a little cheap 10th grade reading level book that we talked about earlier. For your opioid clinic, I'm going to London in 2 weeks to start the first opioid clinic in Europe to treat opioid addiction. There's a separate textbook for your doctor. It's by myself, Gregory Smith. Opioids is not what you need to know. How to use cannabis to get off opioids is the name of the textbook. How to use cannabis to get off opioids. It's by the world's largest textbook publisher. Here's how it changed. From when I wrote the textbook 6 years ago, I had to literally blackmail my publisher to produce a textbook on medical cannabis.
I was there.
I did have photographs of him with sheep. And
I held the gun.
It was so hard to get a proper Boston publisher to publish a textbook. 2 years ago, the world's largest publisher came to me to write a book on how to get people off opioids with cannabis. So big change, sea change. That textbook is out there for your doctor to use. And then the last, bringing it up to date with the CBD, here's how I do it. You don't want to just recommend one company. Of course, we'd love you to have, say, Treevana, because I think we're at this standard. But there are plenty of other companies at that standard. So I always have 3 companies, and you recommend that they go to one of those 3 websites. And it's mailed to them. All these products can be mailed anywhere, including Delta 8, which does all the same things that Delta 9 does. So recommend 3. That way you're not just pushing one company, and then you're less biased.
And then coming from, in the last 4 years, in helping run strategy for a very large medical platform here in Georgia, we were able to use that platform as a case study to bridge this medicine as an introductory model of how we would introduce this to medical practitioners, mid-levels, and patients. We kind of created our own pilot program, and we realized that even if you introduce this medicine as a go-to medicine, you have to give them a reason why they want to prescribe it, right? Mm-hmm. Or recommend. Now, because of the scheduling, and as Dr. Gregg mentioned, a lot of doctors shine away from that. So then, therefore, you have to use a bridge of how you can introduce this to not only them, but the space. Yeah. What we decided to do is, after kind of reverse engineering a lot of the therapies that were used for pain, this platform was anti-opiates. So opiates was the last thing they would do. They were all about R&D, strategic therapies, holistic therapies, and so on. So what we decided to do is, after reverse engineering, we figured out that doctors love to prescribe BioFreeze, right? BioFreeze is the end solution that saves everything, right? My arm got cut off, BioFreeze it. Tape it, put BioFreeze, call me in the morning. So BioFreeze is a compound and it's a cream, right? It's for pain. It's like a really expensive Icy Hot, which is probably what it really is if I think about it.
That's exactly what it is.
It's a really expensive Icy Hot that insurance companies love to pay for. And sometimes when you look at the billables, they're like $150, $300 for like a BioFreeze. So it's funny when you see the insurance companies. So on one end, we spent a significant amount of time and energy in finding products that we can introduce to our patients that they've used before.
Substitution.
Substitution. So for example, as mentioned, everybody do their own due diligence and figure out what those type of pain creams you can use. There's several from very good platforms. But an example is, my case study was, come over here, I'd bring in the doctor, give me your left hand. They'd give me my left hand. I'd say, this is BioFreeze. All right? No, actually, I would say, where do you have pain? They'd say, oh, I have pain in my right shoulder. I'm like, okay, perfect. And then on that day, I would put their BioFreeze on, and then I would wait like 3 hours, because then I'd have to wait 3 hours to get it off, because BioFreeze, any type of cream that's that strong takes forever to come off. And then I would say, okay, now I'm going to give you this cream. And I wouldn't tell them what it is. I would just put it on them. And then I would wait, and then within 30 minutes, because of the transdermal effect and the fast-acting absorption, they would just say, oh, my God, I can move my shoulder, right?
Yeah.
And then at that moment, I would say, you know what that is? They're like, what? No, first I would say, are you high?
Right. Yeah.
Right? And they're
Get
like,
past that stigma.
I would say, they're like, no, I'm not high. Perfect. That is cannabis. They're like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose my license. No, that's CBD.
Yeah.
Right?
And you think about it too, an almost identical product, you know, you apply it the same way, you rub it on. The difference is, instead of just engaging your nervous and your muscular system, you're engaging an entirely additional system of the body, the endocannabinoid system, which is the ruler and regulator of all other systems of the body. Once you've engaged the endocannabinoid system, that's when you're getting the most effective healing and the most effective medicine.
Yes.
You know, so it looks like apples and apples, but when you consider the fact that two products that next to each other on the shelves could appear very similar,
Are completely
one could be
different.
so much more active and so much more beneficial just by engaging that endocannabinoid system that otherwise, you know,
Yeah.
is not even involved.
So so kind of fast tracking your answer is I would do, another bridge that we would use was his book. So I would find short books that can introduce this particular space and buy as many as you can, and then use that as a bridge to say, hey, doctor so-and-so, here's a book. And then once you get done reading it, I want you to come see me. Then they'll come see you, and I usually do the case study where give me your hand. Here's the cream.
I keep about 20 copies of Dr. Greg's books in my
Yeah.
office at all time, and the first thing when people come in and start asking me questions about endocannabinoid system, CBD, I say, read this first and then come back to me with your questions. This is
Yeah.
going to answer everything you want to know.
And then they usually
We'll
say,
circle
oh my
back.
God, I didn't know. Then the next thing I would say, okay, here's the cream, try
And then you
this.
move forward. Yeah.
And then once they see that this is a bridge to this particular space, then the other is, I consider all you guys friends now. So one of the things I would do if I were you in Kentucky is I would develop relationships with some of these independent sources or labs or some of the groups here, and see what you can do to create your own cream that you can introduce to Kentucky, right? And then remember, doctors are doctors, but they're really bad businessmen.
Well, and one of the things that I'll mention, so Dr. Greg and I are working together because education is so instrumental, and as a patient, I want to know that my doctors have access to everything. So we've created something called Healing the Healers. It's a nonprofit where we bring doctors in, and they are able to get access to their CMEs. All healthcare providers are actually invited, but we're more so focusing on their mental health while they're there to learn about this amazing flower. But before we go any further, I want to know if there are any more questions out there. Do you have a question? Does anyone else have a question?
You have too many? Did you want to ask a
Just
question?
pick one. Oh, look, there's someone right there with a question.
Okay, cool. You can go first, and then I'll ask my question after.
Hey, Dr. Greg, is your book available here today for purchase?
I don't know.
I don't know that we have extra copies on hand, but he can definitely direct you to his
Yes.
website where they're available for sure.
Yeah.
It's on Amazon. I have 4 textbooks out there.
But before
Yeah.
you do, let me give you my Amazon promo code.
Yeah.
And his website is GregoryLSmithMD.com. No www, just GregoryLSmithMD.com.
Great. Okay, last question. So you talked a lot about bringing medical cannabis to Atlanta. Can you give us a very high-level overview of what it would take to open a medical dispensary? I know that's a loaded question. We don't have much time, so just the very high
It's
level.
a quick answer.
Okay.
So over the course of the last 2.5, 3 years, Georgia has been going through the process of licensing companies. We had about 80 companies apply here in the state of Georgia with 6 licenses. Those are vertically integrated licenses. That means each one of those 6 companies is required to grow their own product, manufacture and extract their own product, and dispense their own product. Each one of those licensees is entitled to have 5 dispensaries, and that'll increase with the number of patients enrolled in the population. As the number of patients grow, the number of dispensaries will grow as well. So, and those 6 licensees were designated last July. Now that we've made it through the most current legislative session that has come to a close with no major issues or headaches for the cannabis space, we're able to move forward. Don't take this to the bank, but in a perfect world, if everything goes right, there should be medicine on the shelves by the end of the year. You know, so a heads up for those that those that don't know, Governor Kemp just allocated $150,000 of his emergency fund to expediting the process of getting the licensees up and running. So after 3 years of not having a lot of attention from the governor's office, a kind of somewhat dramatic and messy legislative session has now gotten us a little bit of attention and lit a fire, and also being an election year didn't hurt. So.
And then also to kind of support Cassandra, that a lot of the operators that were awarded licenses, you know, this isn't their first rodeo. So once licenses are operational, a lot of them can fast track medicine, you know, in under 90 days. The main advocacy component towards all this is the scalability of the patient population, right?
And I'd like to comment on that in a minute.
Yeah, so the scalability of the patient population, where an example of this is, let's pretend I sell soda, and let's pretend I sell soda, and I have my soda in 50 gas stations. Now let's pretend that in order to get soda, you need to have a medical marijuana card, and there's only 10 people that have medical marijuana or soda cards, right? Think about as a business owner, the economics of it don't justify the investment, right? So therefore, it behooves
All of us.
It behooves
the entire
entire
state.
industry to grow this population size, so then therefore it can create a better cost and premium to the end user, which is a patient, right? Because what happens in a medical cannabis environment is products are expensive because it's a medicine, right? And at the end of the day, which is intriguing, is you have, from a feasibility perspective, on the recreational side, the average user is a female that's usually a single mother between the ages of 25 and 35. That's like the recreational user, according to data profiling, right? Then on the medical side, medical is medicine, so it has to deal with the modalities, right? Or the qualifying conditions. So as this particular space, you know, continuously evolves, the end goal is to provide quality medicine for patients. And what happens is the state mandates that these compassionate programs exist to help justify those costs. Because if, let's just say, if I have a child and my child has autism and the medicine is $300 and I need a $300 medicine every week, right? That's $1,200 a month that I can't afford because insurance doesn't cover it.
Right.
One of the easiest ways to bring down the cost of medicine is enrolling more patients. You know, so if you know somebody that could benefit, you know, I urge everyone to try and create or light a fire under people to go ahead and get the cannabis card. You know, it's going to be available on shelves, but it really is a symbiotic relationship where when more people participate in the program, it lowers the price of the medicine for all that are involved.
And everybody's in a great, timing is amazing because before Corona, the collegiate and also medical industries were anti-telemedicine, right? And now, because of Corona, telemedicine is the new norm and Zoom is the new world, right?
Yeah.
Where the average person now will have the availability to see patients. The medical providers will be able to see patients virtually to help fast track this process.
Yeah, and as a patient, I will do a call to you guys if you are out there and it's something that you need and have access to. Please be vocal about it, because the more they hear from the patients and the more your doctor hears that you are concerned and you want to know, the more I think we'll get involvement and they'll understand that it's not about getting high. It's actually about the patient. I know this panel is about to wrap up, so I definitely wanted to thank absolutely everybody. Hugo, Cassandra, Dr. Greg, thank you for everything. Thanks for being here.
Thank you,
Treehab,
Keisha.
Thank you,
Brandon,
Cassandra.
thank you again.
All right, let's give the panel another round of applause. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Greg. All right, so I have been informed that it is now happy hour in the Treevana Lounge. So we have drinks ready, music, the DJ's there. So go grab some drinks. We will be starting back at 2:30. We've got 3 great sessions that are happening at the 2:30 window. So please join us for the 2:30 session. We'll be back at 4. And we want everybody to stay until our reception tonight. Our chef has prepared some really great food items, so please don't leave, because we paid for that food.